Yes, don't worry, we will talk about this abomination. Now, up until a few years ago, if you wanted a decent boom arm, there was one choice, and it was the RODE PSA1. And recently they upgraded that slightly with the PSA1 Plus, and well, who can blame them as the field is getting a bit crowded these days. In this mic arm, the Warm Audio Boom is priced right in between the PSA1 and the new PSA1 Plus. So then, those have to be the obvious comparables for this video. Now, before I forget, I should say Warm Audio did send me this boom arm for the sake of this review, but they do not have any say in the content for this video. Okay, I can hear you saying it, but Aiden, it's just a boom arm, right? Well, that is true, but hang on for a second. The boom arm is the tool that you use to secure your expensive microphone and suspend it above the table, right? So would you hang an expensive piece of art with just a single small little nail? Probably not. The boom arm is the nail. You're placing a very expensive piece of equipment on the end of a long boom arm and suspending it over a table. You want to make sure that that long arm is up to the task. Of course, if you reach out and ask me, I will tell you every time that the base recommendation, the cheapest boom arm you should buy, will always be the RODE PSA1, and it's for that reason. Now, with that said, I do plan on doing a full breakdown of boom arms from cheap to expensive, and maybe we'll see me change my mind on one. You never know. That video is coming soon, so get subscribed if you don't want to miss that. So this boom arm is basically all metal construction, but notably with the connections as plastic. Now, I do know why they did this. It's much cheaper to produce, but it would have been nice to see those joints as metal. That said, it isn't really cheap feeling, and the system does work well, so it's more of a long-term thing to see if it loses some of its sturdiness over time. Otherwise, it's a nice build. I really do like the cable channels for management, but there's one thing that really confuses me a bit. This is how the arm came to me. And like the RODE PSA1, it comes with that little nut that secures the microphone down, right? Well, this nut is only for 3/8, which is odd considering it won't attach to the smaller mount. I guess most mics are actually 3/8 mount, but this doesn't have a 3/8 mount on it. It's a weird inclusion or exclusion, I guess. So for features, I mean, there really isn't much to highlight. I get it. It's a boom arm. Cable channeling, nice feature, as we said. And it is becoming more and more common, which is nice to see. With the original PSA1, it didn't have it, but the updated model, the PSA1 Plus, does have that feature. Now, it does offer the common screw-on style for mounting or the drill-through. And I should mention I'm not a massive fan of the screw-on mount. It doesn't feel as stable as it could. Even after tightening it, it feels less stable than the RODE setup. Otherwise, the only other big deal on this thing is the locking joints. This is something that has generally only been included on higher price brands like the OC Whites of this world. And a lot of people don't actually know that you can actually stiffen up the PSA1 with these screws on the joints. And to be completely honest, I always kind of knew about it, but I never really did anything about it until a few months ago. It's super handy when you have a very light microphone like an SM58 or something. But that said, it isn't toolless, and this option just seems like it would appeal to everyone. It's so much easier. Okay, then this thing has one really cool feature that I love, but it does feel like it would take a bit more for me to move over from the PSA1. Now, the base on this thing isn't as sturdy as the RODE. I would almost prefer it if it was drilled through the table, but that's not really an option for everyone. It is definitely quieter to operate than the original PSA1, but not necessarily the PSA1 Plus, which is a big deal. And if your mic placement is just perfect, this thing's a no-brainer. However, there is a fly in the ointment in what I just said. What if your setup isn't perfect? Correcting your setup mid-session isn't the greatest experience, and honestly, with it feeling somewhat less stable at the base, that can be a hair-raising experience with an expensive microphone on the end. Now, the cable routing on the Warm Audio is much nicer for appearance than the snaps on the PSA1, and it does feel somewhat more permanent. Also, the ability to literally get this thing splayed all the way out is kind of cool. Though if the mic you're using is a tad heavy, you're really going to have to reef on those nuts. And I mean reef on those nuts. I think I'm saying nuts too much. But if you can get it just right, this thing basically turns into a low-profile boom arm. Though I do struggle to consider the useful application there. I'll let you decide on the best way to use it. Now, what I have to say is the weakest part of the PSA1 has always been that locking nut at the top that connects the mic. Now, I really do like the warm audio solution, though there is one big issue there, which leads us into the pros and cons. And it would be impossible to start the cons without mentioning this godforsaken pole that I'm using with my SM7B. It's a nightmare to use with this microphone without that pole. It just doesn't actually work. You can't get the cable plugged in when it's all the way up here due to this big knob. Now on the PSA1, it's rather close and you don't get your full range of motion, but at least you can do it. With this thing, you can't. Now, the extension is included with the boom arm and it does work, but I do have to say it looks rather stupid. Other than that, the lack of stability with the clamp system is frustrating, but that said, I don't think it's a complete deal breaker, as you can just drill a hole and be done with it. The only other con I can see are kind of one of the positive things. It's the tightening bolts. They take a lot of force to get them good and tight, which I get considering there's a bunch of leverage there. But when they're plastic, that will always be a concern. Over-tightening will break plastic, so weigh that option carefully. Now, as for the pros, it is super versatile and it's sleek. And while that seems silly to say, at this price point, you take what you can get. The cable management, quite good. And lastly, it is super quiet in its operation, which cannot be said about the original PSA1, especially after a year or two. But all that said, it does not beat the PSA1 Plus, but is it a better option than the original PSA1? Okay, then to close this off, I do love that economy booms are starting to get some of these features. That said, the delivery of these features may need a couple generations to catch up. While I love the way you can tighten the joints on this thing, I'm not sure it's in its final form. Perhaps there is a reason that OC White arms still need an Allen key to tighten up. There is a lot of force necessary to get it just right. And trust me, I'm no slouch. I can open up all the pasta jars with ease. This, though, left my fingers sore and tired. But, and I do say that, big but, there is a place for this boom arm in the conversation. It does do a lot of things right, and at least one thing, very, very wrong. Frankly, I do have to call it. The original PSA1 is cheaper, which means it gets the edge over the warm audio boom. Now, that could all change if the price on this thing changes, but as of now, sorry, warm audio. Now, before I get any of the angry comments down below, I do still think there is value in this boom, and there's a lot of good reasons to buy one. Just not if you own an SM7B, because it just looks dumb. Let me know what you think down below. Cheers, and I will see you in the next video.